Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. When about 6 years ago, Meredith Chilton asked me whether I would contribute to this Du Paquier project, I just asked myself, why is she asking me? I never studied neither the court in Vienna nor Du Paquier. Then she explained that she needed someone to work on the Dubski room, the porcelain room nowadays in Vienna. And as the display system of the 18th century of porcelain are one of my main interests, I agreed to have a look at the literature first. So I read some articles from the early 20th century about the room, which didn't really make much sense. So I was not sure whether I should go for it and do it. But as I have a great respect of Meredith's work, and I knew that her guidance would be brilliant, and I liked the Sullivans, I decided to take Ariadne's, or better Meredith's thread, and to step like Perseus into the labyrinth of the Dubski room. What I would like to present you today is somehow the making of the Dubski room. The room itself is about 7 meters long and 4 meters wide. It has some furniture in gilt wood with some little porcelain plaques on it. And in the room also there is some porcelain furniture as a chimney, fireplace, chimney piece, and the lighting system. It contains also 66 vases and over 1,500 little porcelain plaques, decorated, on a first look, all in the Du Paquier manufactory. Well, so the literature told me from around 1912 onwards that this room originally was in a house in Brünn, in Brno, today in the south of the Czech Republic nowadays. I will show you a map just afterwards. It was two men, two curators, Leisching and Volnesic, one curator in the museum in Brünn, the other one in Vienna, who worked on this room first. In 1912, the family, the owner of this palace, and I show you here, oops, no reaction, here it is, the room in situ, so the room still in this palace. The palace is nowadays taken down. So in 1912, the owner of the room, the Count Dubski, decided to sell the room. Unfortunately, the museum in Brünn itself could not raise the money to buy it, so it was the Austrian museum to buy it and to bring it to Vienna. Nowadays, it is in the Museum of Decorative Arts, the following institution. So nowadays, it looks like this, installed like a box into the museum, an installation, by the way, which was invented by Donald Judd. Now, where are we? You see here Brünn in the south of the Czech Republic, quite close to Vienna. Now, what did the literature, what did they know about the room is they knew about where it came from this certain palace in Brünn, and they knew about a plaque with a coat of arms. But when they dismantled the room and brought it to Vienna, the plaque was painted differently in oil colors with a coat of arms. I'm missing the text. I don't know where the text is now. It was here when I prepared it, but anyway. So the text is gone in the meantime, still in lunch break. So on the right-hand side, you see the coat of arms of the family Piatti of Dirnowitz. Sorry, there is something definitely wrong, thank you. Dirnowitz, a local noble family, not really of high noblehood. Anyway, so they, the plaque was painted over in oil colors, and lately, shortly after the room was brought to Vienna, the curators decided to remove this oil paint because they could see that underneath there is another coat of arms, and so they discovered the coat of arms really in fired colors by Du Paquier, which shows the coat of arms of the family Jobor of Gent Michali, which means of Saint Michael. This family of the Jobors, they were among the great magnates of the Hungarian aristocracy, and one of them, Marcus Jobor, who was around 1700, the leader of the family, was in the service at the Vienna court. He was married with Maria Antonia, a princess of Liechtenstein, the daughter of Johann Adam Andreas, whom we met earlier this afternoon. They had a son, Joseph, which was very famous in the time because he lived an absolutely extravagant life at the Viennese court. So this is approximately all the two authors could find out about the historic background of the room. They note in their articles that the seating furnitures are of slightly later date than the Du Paquier porcelain, which they dated around 1725, 1730, that the program of the paintings, of the portraits is rather strange, but anyway, they dated it around the whole room around 1730. So knowing this, I again thought, does it really make sense to write about if there is not more? So I decided to make a detailed study first. This is just a screenshot from my computer. 4 times the whole text is gone of my pictures. I'm so sorry about. Anyway, so I will give you the information. It would be nice, if you could read it. 1 second. I hope it's an American second and not a German one. Anyway, I can go on with that story because then you don't need this picture too. So I was permitted to stay 4 times every year in the Dubsky room. It was very nice by the staff of the museum in the Mack. And so I could take over 400 detailed pictures of everything. And once I was even locked in the room for 4.5 hours, and it is heaven on earth, I can tell you, on my own, with a ladder and a torch, so I could go as close as I wanted. Thank you very much. Now, so what I show you now, some of the slides, are just a PowerPoint working desk, how I brought everything together to think about the room. So I was, through these pictures, enabled to make lots of detailed pictures and to compare the little details. But even this didn't make sense. It was lots of fun doing it and trying it, but I couldn't come a step closer. So I decided to look at the tradition of porcelain room closer in that room, to compare it with others. Now, if you look to the contemporary rooms around, you see immediately that there is a big, big difference. There is no room which is furnished with little plaques. And by the way, with little plaques which you do not find on other Du Paquier items, not used for covers of snuff boxes or every plaque shape is an individual one only to be found in this room. So this was a little bit strange. Then there was no other porcelain room, as I said, which is furnished with porcelain plaques. And normally the porcelain cabinets of the period, they don't have seating furnitures because they are not living rooms. They are cabinets to be shown and so on. So I stepped back and thought, well, let's concentrate again on the little plaques. So again, one of these working sheets. And as we got a pile of DVDs from the Sullivans with hundreds, if not thousands, of photographs they took all around the world in all the museums of Du Paquier, I could do quite a big study on where do we find this way of little, this kind of little flower sprays on Du Paquier porcelain. I hoped that it would help in doing a datation. And even I hoped that studying the little plaques which are on each object in the room would maybe help to separate by date the different kind of furnitures in the room. Unfortunately, it was not that clear as I had hoped. So I went even further into the details, and you see, even looking at flowers that close, it was like if you write about Rembrandt and concentrate on fingernails. So the question mark stood still. From a picture frame, I can show you here very easily the 2 groups. So there are 3 groups of plaque generation I could finally work out. One on the left-hand side is definitely the earlier one. The colors much closer to Du Paquier as to early Du Paquier. And finally, on the right-hand side, you see much more steroid forms, and they are painted much smoother and regular. So at least I could see two groups of little plaques. But what to do with this information? It was a phone call, which was very thrilling, a phone call by Claudia from Vienna. She told me that she had just another phone call with the curator of the museum with Mrs. Strakova in Brünn, and this curator told her that there is a historian called Thomas Jerabek in Brünn, who had found by coincidence in the private archive of the Kaunitz family, a private archive which is housed in the State Archive in Brünn, some material documents which prove the whole story of the Dubsky room. So you can imagine what it did to me. I immediately called Mr. Jerabek, and he repeated it, said, yes, I know everything, I know when it was where and for whom it was made, and so on. But he didn't give me the signatures of the records because he was working himself on a project about the Brünn noble families, so he wanted to keep it for himself. Well, I tried to be penetrant, and I called him again and again and again, but he was often away, didn't give me the signatures. Then the State Archive in Brünn closed down for moving to a modern building, and they packed all the records, no access to any of the documents. Again, it was a horrible situation. I was close by making a phone call to Meredith and say, I'm very sorry, you have to live without the Dubsky room. But then I decided to go on and went again to Vienna to make a study on the vases. And together with Claudia, the staff was so kind to bring us down all the vases we had in our hand to look very close. The result is an inventory of all the vases. The shapes you will find an inventory into the third volume of the catalogue. So there was an inventory, and it really turned out that it's helpful to look at these masses in once. For example, the different shapes, that there are different sizes of the same shapes. And by the way, it's the same thing with the vases, like with the little plaques. These shapes only exist in the Dubsky room and not outside of these vases. So they were seems to be a special commission. And I even could find out that there is a group of different shapes which are obviously painted by one hand. So there must have been a second commission somehow to be added. And again, also this hand was much smoother, much more accurate in painting than the other ones. We also found things we knew from the literature. You see it it's not very clear. It is, the right has a stamp of the mark of the Imperial Viennese manufactory from 1847. So we knew that there was an addition to the room. And another addition, on the left-hand side, it's a Du Paquier example, and on the right-hand side, it's Hair-end. A Hair-end edition, and there are several of them, from around 1900, 1890, 1900. So something must have been on with the room. And finally, taking down the vases brought the surprise that one shape never is painted on the reverse side. So it must have been ordered to be placed exactly as it is in the room, because you wouldn't see the reverse side. So this patterned all together. Then I concentrated on the furniture. It didn't make sense that there is a break, really cut, a cut with no correspondence in these frieze to hold porcelain. Or there is a cut, it's quite brutal made, in the corner with these edges, and there is no really correspondence between the over window oak panel and the rest of this corner. There is also no really correspondence between the paneling and the door frame in the heightness, and some freely floating ornaments which absolutely make no sense in correspondence of if you think that ornament has to support an architectural structure. And finally, last but not least, two corner tables overlapping even the door frame. Just imagine how complicated it is to have a room like this. So there were lots of question marks on the furniture as well. We knew already that there are, from the 8 wall sconces, 2 groups. To the left-hand side, you see one of a group of it's 8 and 8, it's 16. So one of 8 wall sconces where all the sprays of flowers are different in this group, and it has much strength and power in painting, while the other 8 of them have always the very accurate same sprays of flower around, flower wisps around, certainly copied from one model, very accurate, perfect in the sense of accurate done, and much less powerful painted. The same thing we find with the chandeliers. To the left-hand side, there are 2 chandeliers with these Indian flowers and the main baluster, which has a structure which is ribbed, while one, originally was 2, chandeliers have a smooth baluster with European flowers painted. So they must be also from a different period. Now, how to date them around 1725, 1730 both, it wouldn't work with the one on the right-hand side. And we know, by the way, one chandelier from 1725 around is from the Meissen manufactory, which is in the Rijksmuseum nowadays. So you see, by the way, it's just now has nothing to do with my topic, but you see the enormous skills of Du Paquier. To do a chandelier like this is really an adventure. It's a tour de force of porcelain in this period. Even in Meissen, it looks quite, well, not as elaborate as in the Du Paquier manufactory. But by the way, you just see there are generations as well on the tabletops of the console tables. The 2 corner tables, the plaques are really fitting in, and each is made of 4 plaques, and the flower overlap the edges of the plaques, even if the edges are painted with leaves to hide the edge. Anyway, it looks much more as a unity, as the center console table has a leaf made of different square plaques which are cut into a shape, and you see the flowers are just cut. It doesn't really make an overall impression. And this table also has the porcelain, little porcelain plaques which are in the wood, are just brutally cut in. So there must have been undecorated or just a normal giltwood console table, which was then dressed up with this porcelain. Looking a little bit, now, here we are, thank you. Looking to the other 2 tables, there's a center table with a sofa and another console table with no porcelain top on it, but they are painted. Now, the upper one here for you, the center sofa table, is clearly painted in an 18th century chinoiserie style, while the other console table has some of these, I called it in the article, some lazy Biedermeier flowers, which are really in the style of about 1830, 1840, but not as lively as the old one and the other one. And looking at the carving, so this is the foot of a chair, and this is this side table with the Biedermeier flowers, and you see here ornaments which definitely do not date back to the 18th century, which must be the 19th century. For the seating furniture, I'm pressing, but for the seating furniture, I contacted Christian Wittwer, the furniture curator from the museum in Vienna, from the MAC, and he said that he never really studied the seated furniture in this room very closely, but he had some question marks about, because he said, well, they look with the porcelain plaques, they look so much 19th century in the idea, but the upholstery, the technique of the upholstery would be an mid-18th century way of upholstery. So this really didn't help me much. So I tried to look for other examples. We know some 18th century furniture with glass inlay, and we know a famous set of 4 pieces with porcelain plaques, Meissen porcelain most likely, painted in Augsburg, and then in the Munich residence, these 2 gueridons, and then fit into these gueridons. But as I had the chance to look closer at these gueridons, it turned out that all these plaques are not crafted by Meissen to fit into this piece of furniture, but that this, for example, is just a shard of a coffee pot and then cut out and made to fit. So it has this swing from the shoulder of the coffee pot, and there are even parts from bowls and so on, just to have the shaped parts you need, and then it was painted. But on the other hand, these plaques, they are all really in the right size. They were ordered really to be worked into this piece of furniture. There are other plaques on the wall in these framings. The framings turned out to have been made in papier mâché, taken from molds, and these are not from the same mold. There are slightly differences, as you can see, but there are about 4 or 5 molds for the same pattern you could trace back. So they were molded, and where do we find plaques like this framed? So I look back to older furniture, cabinets, and even in the contemporary time, these are also plaques which are here put into a Schönborn cabinet. So to use plaques, well, that's a tradition, but not really porcelain plaques. For the rest of the style, here the over door and over window panels of the Dubsky room, the style of the wood carving is quite clear. It is Régence style, Rococo style, but even here you see again, there's a miracle what happened there. Only 2 objects are clearly of the time, I thought first. This is a 1775, 1780 wall clock using older Du Paquier painted items, plaques, and a picture frame, which, well, everyone would like to date in the 19th century, but it will turn out what it is later on. So, being quite shocked about these parts, which look more like jewelry from 1840, I looked into the 19th century comparisons of using plaques here, for example, in Russian furniture or even in Viennese furniture. But at the end, I thought again, I have to call Meredith and tell her it does not work. You see, just one of these things I had to work on. Now, it was another phone call which helped me. And it was a phone call with, again, with Christian Wittwer, because he pointed my attention to another room in Vienna. Let's make the Dubsky room black and white so we can compare it better. These 2 views are from a room in Vienna, from a palace which was acquired by another princess of Liechtenstein, by Maria Amalia, and she was the sister of Maria Antonia, the one which was married with the Jobor in Brünn. So her sister had bought in 1742 this palace, refurnished the rooms by the help of the architect Nikolaus Pakassi, and the palace later became ein Damenstift, so it's today known as the Savoyisches Damenstift. Why could she do that? Because in 1737, the mother of the 2, it was more than 2 sisters, but of the 2 sisters, the mother died and they inherited. But from letters I read from Maria Antonia, I found out that it took about 5 years really to manage this inheritance and to divide it up between the sisters. So with this inheritance in 1742, her sister could buy this room, these rooms, this palace. Now, looking to details in the wood paneling, the Dubsky room and 2 from the Vienna house, I just learned that I have been, again once in my life, completely ignorant to the focus of female power, that the Jobor was wrong, that I should have concentrated much more on his wife, on Maria Amalia. And in this moment of hope, it was another phone call reaching me, and this time a very positive one. Thomas Jerabek had changed his mind, and he had given the signatures of the documents I was for 5 months longing to see to a friend of his, a historian. And here Annette Ahrens called me and helped me. So 2 days later, I jumped into my car from Berlin to Dresden, to Prague, to Brünn. 5 o'clock in the morning I left, 7 hours, it took a little bit more. By 11 I was there, and Annette came from Vienna, and we went into this very modern state archive and at least got the documents. It was the testaments, the last wills of the princesses of Liechtenstein, of her second husband, of the heir afterwards, and so on, and it was incredible. So, in the afternoon, in the evening, I drove back, so it was quite a long journey. And now what I like to do, or what I did also in the book, is to give you an idea of the making of the Du Paquier room. Just notice, this is the result of links between written sources and all the observations I had collected before. And it suddenly really came together, and it started to make sense in the brain and on the paper. So, my suggestion now, in 1718, Maria Antonia is buying a house in Brünn on the so-called Big Place. A couple of years later, in 1724, she acquires the house next door, and she makes her palace really big. In the process of decorating now this big house, she decides to install a porcelain cabinet decorated with porcelain from the manufactory in Vienna, which was much supported by her family. So she ordered vases, and she ordered some little plaques in frames. She ordered a coat of arm plaque with the coat of arm of her husband and her, the Jobor of St. Mihaly, 2 chandeliers, only one is in this sketch here, 1 wall sconces, and so on. And she put it on the wall in the way of the period, as a wood-paneled room with inlay of these little plaques. To give you 2 examples, contemporary, you see, this was just it was a fashion in the period to have here its miniatures or precious stones and pietre dure, to have objects really fixed, little collections fixed to the wall. So this is my suggestion. The room could have looked like in this period. Now, in 1728, so just when the room maybe was finished, her husband, Jobor, died, at least, and because the marriage was absolutely unhappy, and there are books about this marriage. And in 1731, she married again a local nobleman, Karl Hürsan. They lived in the palace in Brünn, and as I explained to you with the example of her sister, she inherited from her mother an enormous wealth. So in the same time as her sister in Vienna, she starts in 1742 aroundish to redecorate her palace. And of course, this porcelain room was no more decorative and contemporary fashionable enough. So it may have looked like this. She had now wooden paneling around, supraport and a mirror surrounding in oak and gold carved, so in the style of 1742, as we've seen. She knew new doors, and maybe the room had 2 windows, and there were a special frieze of hanging consoles for little things, little porcelain was done, and these hanging corner étagères. Then it went on. She had 2 console tables made and bought 2 further chandeliers, so you must imagine 4 chandeliers. And finally, she had some seating furniture made in the style of 1742, and therefore she ordered some new little plaques, and as the end she needed also more vases, and it's this second group I found, which she must have ordered in 1742 when the style of Du Paquier already was a little bit different. and also some of the wall sconces, the other group of 8. Now, she saw in the storage of Du Paquier this incredible chimney piece made of 7 pieces, but decorated not in Indian flowers like the little blocks, but in European flowers, as well as the tops of these corner tables, and the 2 other chandeliers. But as they were available and so rich, and Du Paquier already had problems financially, in 1742 she decides to buy them, even if they do not really match the room, but other things which Du Paquier had to make to fit her new room, like the wall sconces, he had to paint still in the chinoiserie, out of fashion somehow style. So and we've seen that's of course the inspiration, her sister, and she also has Nicolas Pacassi to do that. And what I suggest that she also had here tapestries on the wall as well as her sister, because this would make a real 1742 room, just looking to 2 other porcelain cabinets from the period, and you see the porcelain rooms get more and more comfortable with some seating, furniture, but still great display systems. Now she dies in 1750 and leaves her house to her second husband, the Count Harras, who goes on living in. And on the 12th of February in 1756, there's a fire in the palace. Also, this we found it in the documents. The fire didn't destroy the palace, but you may follow my suggestion that the smoke maybe made it necessary to replace the textiles. So the room again changed. Her husband removed the old-fashioned tapestries, which were full of no more usable, and put a fashionable yellow silk on it. Also, the furniture was reupholstered in yellow silk. And then, because silk is different to the wall than a very strong tapestry, he needed these borders or with little plaques to fix the silk on to the wall. And therefore, he had to order little porcelain plaques, but Du Paquier was no more existent. So I suggest, because they also differ in style, that all these little plaques were made in the Imperial manufactory. He added a sofa table and some boxes to spit in, which are not on this picture. So you see, he turned it really into a living room. He added, therefore, 2 picture frames with some picture in, and the 3rd console table, the big one, he had already, and he altered it, as I showed you, with these not really fitting porcelain plaques. Maybe these plaques were before into the chimney piece or wherever. So he altered it, but he left the coat of arms, which now was on the window side. He dies now in 1770 and leaves his sorry, I forgot to show you just 2 rooms from the period, 1760s around. Here the Vieux-Lac-Zimmer in Schönbrunn, and you have all the, it's like a living room as well, it's a representative living room, but you have all the plaques, also lacquer plaques in the furniture. Anyway, so he leaves his house to his nephew, Karl von Dobelstein, but imagine, 1770, this is all out of fashion, and he really, his nephew, preferred not to live in this old-fashioned thing, and he sold the room. He sold it to the family Emanuel Piatti von Dirnowitz. You remember the coat of arms at the very beginning. This family had been ennobled just recently and was very keen in showing the world that they were always very grand and very aristocratic. So an old-fashioned, out-of-fashion porcelain room was the absolute must to have to show we were always rich. So they dismantled the room and brought it into another palace, in their palace, in the Dirnowitz Palace, also in Brünn. And this is the key point which the authors around 1912 couldn't know, because they didn't have the document, that the room was not always in one house, but it was brought from one house to the other. This made some changes necessary, because they didn't have a room to fit. The chimney piece came to the corner, therefore one of the corner consoles had to go. The door was brought to the end of the room, the two console tables to the other end of the room, and one of the chandeliers was too much because the room was smaller, and that's how it ended up then. The fourth chandelier ended up as a showing piece above the chimney, and the branches of the chandelier as wall branches worked into the existing paneling. Then he added a contemporary clock because he had some of the little plaques left. The room was now much smaller than before, so he gave them to the local clockmaker and had this cartel made. He added, with the same plaques, a painting, another painting, which shows the portrait of the Emperor Joseph. Beneath, I didn't mention that, you see a portrait of Maria Theresia, which already her son had brought into the room. So this was her son's empress, and now this is the Piatti von Tirnowitzen's majesty. So they show with these two paintings, yes, we were always very close with the imperial family, and some other additions were made, like the paintings around 1810. He put even family portraits of his wife and his daughter into these frames, being very close with the imperial family. Now, we don't know when, but somehow in the 1830s, this console table was added as well. Now, Emanuel Piatti von Tirnowitz had a daughter who married a Count Dubski, and that's how the Dubski room came into the tradition, into the family of the Dubskis, who sold them then in 1912. First, in 1904, they showed on a Vienna exhibition about Viennese porcelain. They showed lots of these items, but then, as I said, in 1912 it was sold. Now, this is a help through the different periods, which you will find together with the legend in the book. It looks like Andy Warhol, but it guides you through the different changes of the whole room. It took 5 years of living with this room to get to this point now, to have this suggestion. Now, I especially wanted to show you how long it can take to think about, because it was not only the breathtaking generosity of the Sullivans allowing the authors to travel, which is exceptional. It was not only the fabulous, sparkling team of scholars around them they assembled, first of all, Meredith Chilton. It is really something else, which for all of us curators who have another work also, they gave us time. They gave us time to work on it, and that's the most precious gift they could give us. Even if they hardly could wait to see the birth of their baby. It became triplets now. So we should suggest, with a thank to the Sullivans, to use a new subtitle, Fired by Passion, Awaited with Patience. Thank you very much.